Ever get that feeling, when you meet someone and they just radiate this, like, almost superhuman level of self-confidence?
Hmm.
Well, today we're taking a deep dive into what might be going on beneath the surface. Narcissistic personality disorder.
Okay.
And we're not talking about someone who just likes taking selfies a little too much here.
Yeah.
We're going deep with the clinical side of things.
Yeah.
Our main source. The Mayo Clinic's research on NPD.
Good stuff. It's really important to get that clinical perspective because the term narcissists gets tossed around so casually these days.
I know, right? Like, everyone's a narcissist these days, but what does it really mean from, like, a psychological standpoint?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Clinically, NPD is a whole other ballgame, way beyond, just being a bit self-centered.
Totally. And that's what I found so fascinating about the Mayo Clinic's take on this. They don't just stop at vanity. They lay out all these different symptoms, and some of them were honestly pretty surprising to me.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it. What stood out to you?
Well, one thing was that deep, almost desperate need for admiration that they're always seeking out.
Oh, absolutely.
And then there's that unwavering sense of entitlement. Like, they truly believe they deserve special treatment, even when it's just completely out of touch with reality.
Yeah, and that's often when you start to see the cracks in the facade.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Because all that outward confidence, it's often masking a deep well of insecurity.
Really?
Think about it. Constantly needing validation from others, being terrified of criticism because it might just confirm your deepest fear that you're not good enough. It's exhausting.
So it's almost like a defense mechanism then.
Right.
Like, they build up this huge ego as a way to protect this very fragile sense of self.
Exactly. And that's why understanding this disorder, being able to spot these signs in ourselves and in others, it's so crucial.
Yeah.
Totally.
Totally.
It's not about slapping labels on people. It's about cultivating empathy and knowing when it might be time to get some help.
Which brings up such a big question. Where does this even come from? What makes someone a narcissist in the first place? Is it nature? Is it nurture? The classic debate.
The million-dollar question, right?
Right. And, the Mayo Clinic, they actually say it's likely a combination of factors, a perfect storm, kind of.
That makes sense, doesn't it? It's
Yeah.
rarely just one thing.
I know, right? So let's start unpacking this. What does the Mayo Clinic say about how our upbringing, our environment might play a role?
Okay, well, imagine growing up with parents who showered you with praise no matter what you did.
Yeah.
Whether you actually earned it or not.
Oh.
Or on the flip side, imagine constant harsh criticism no matter how hard you tried.
So either extreme could really mess with your sense of self.
Exactly. You start to see these patterns, and it shapes how you view yourself in the world.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got environment playing a role, but what about genetics? Could you inherit a predisposition for narcissism?
That's the big question. And to be honest, researchers are still trying to figure that out.
It's pretty mind-blowing to think about. Like, could it be in your DNA?
Yeah.
So we've got the environment, maybe genetics, anything else. What other factors come into play?
Well, the Mayo Clinic also highlights neurobiology.
Neurobiology.
Yeah, our brains are incredibly complex. And the interplay of chemicals, neural pathways, all of that, it can really influence our behaviors and thought patterns.
It's like we're trying to decipher the recipe for personality, but some ingredients are still a mystery.
Yeah, totally.
But here's where things get really interesting for me. What happens when NPD goes unchecked? Like, what are the real-world consequences of this? Because the Mayo Clinic gets into some pretty intense stuff about that.
Yeah, and, this is where we have to move beyond that kind of stereotypical image of a narcissist, right?
Yeah.
The idea of them as just being vain or self-absorbed, because the truth is NPD can have a really big impact,
Okay.
on relationships, careers, even someone's mental health.
So we're not just talking about, like, a little bit of drama here.
No.
This is serious stuff.
Yeah, this is serious.
So, like, how does this actually play out? Let's start with relationships. You mentioned that.
Right.
The Mayo Clinic talks about the strain NPD can put on relationships.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine trying to be in a relationship, trying to maintain this healthy relationship when you constantly need to be the center of attention, right?
Right.
When you have a hard time really empathizing with your partner's needs, when any little thing that could be perceived as criticism, sends you into a tailspin.
Yeah.
It's just a recipe for disaster.
And it's not just romantic relationships, is it?
No, not at all.
The Mayo Clinic also talks about how NTD can affect your work life.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Picture this. You're brilliant, super talented, but you need constant praise and recognition, even for, like, the smallest tasks.
Oh, wow.
And then any feedback Any kind of constructive criticism, it just feels like a personal attack.
Yeah, ouch.
So how do you think that's going to fly in a collaborative work environment?
Yeah, not well. So even if someone has all the skills and the talent, those kind of interpersonal issues are just going to be a roadblock to success.
Totally, 100%.
And then there's impact on mental health, right?
Right.
Because living with this constant need for validation, this fear of not being good enough, it's got to take a toll, right?
Absolutely. It's exhausting. And it can lead to like a higher risk of depression, anxiety, even suicidal thoughts, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's really heavy stuff. And, we often hear about how NPD affects the people around the narcissist.
Right.
But this really highlights the internal struggles too, right? It's a good reminder that this is a mental health condition and it has some pretty serious consequences. So let's shift gears a little bit. What can be done? Does the Mayo Clinic talk about treatment options?
They do. They do. But that's actually where things get a little tricky.
Okay.
Because people with NPD, they often don't see a problem. Right. So they're resistant to seeking help in the first place. It's like this catch-22.
Interesting.
Their inflated sense of self kind of prevents them from recognizing that they need help.
Yeah.
But therapy, and specifically a type of therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
CBT.
Yeah, CBT can be really effective.
So how does that work? Can you break that down a little bit? How could CBT help someone with NPD?
Sure. Basically, CBT helps people identify and challenge those negative thought patterns and behaviors that are kind of the root of NPD. It's about equipping them with healthier coping mechanisms, learning to regulate their emotions and build more genuine connections with other people.
So it's almost like rewiring those ingrained responses.
Exactly.
Okay. And that makes me think, what about early intervention? Could we potentially, address some of these things earlier on in life, maybe even during childhood, to prevent some of these deeper struggles down the line?
That's a great question. And the Mayo Clinic actually touches on that.
Oh, really?
Imagine if we gave kids the tools, the emotional intelligence tools, to understand their emotions, to manage their emotions, to develop a healthy sense of self-worth, right?
Right.
A sense of self-worth that isn't solely based on external validation. I mean, it's a powerful idea.
Yeah. It really makes you think about the messages we're sending to young people, right? Like, are we, without even realizing it, are we contributing to this pressure to be perfect, to be extraordinary, to the point where it becomes detrimental?
It's definitely something to consider. This whole deep dive into NPD, it's really got me thinking bigger picture here.
Yeah, me too.
What is our fascination with this disorder, with these, kind of larger than life personalities? What does that say about us?
Yeah.
About our society?
Yeah, it's like we're all chasing validation these days.
Right.
And social media, it's got to be playing a role in all of this, right?
A huge role. I mean, think about it. We're constantly bombarded with these perfectly curated images, right? These success stories. And they often kind of gloss over all the struggles, all the hard work that went into it.
Right, right.
And then it's just this constant pressure to build your own personal brand. I mean, it's easy to see how someone could get caught up in all of that.
Totally. It's like, where's the line between healthy ambition and that more, narcissistic need for admiration? It gets blurry.
Kind of blurry. And that's why understanding NPD, it's not just about like diagnosing individuals.
Right.
It's about looking at those bigger societal forces at play.
Yeah, it's about looking at the bigger picture.
Exactly. What are the messages we're sending as a society?
It's a good question.
What are we valuing?
So it's not just about changing individual behavior, but maybe examining these broader cultural norms.
100%.
Yeah.
What if we, instead of celebrating those who shout the loudest, strive for the most like visible signs of success,
Yeah.
What if we shifted our focus to promoting empathy, compassion,
Yeah.
a more balanced sense of self-worth?
Now that's something to think about. It's amazing how we start with this deep dive into NPD and it ends up making you question all these like fundamental societal values.
That's the thing. It's all connected. And the more we understand these connections, the better equipped we are to really understand ourselves and those around us.
That's a great point to end on. And on that note, we're wrapping up this deep dive into narcissistic personality disorder. Hopefully this sparks some new ideas, maybe even challenge some old ones.
Absolutely.
And remember, this is really just scratching the surface. So if you want to go even deeper, be sure to check out the Mayo Clinic's website. We'll link it in the show notes.
Great resource.
Until next time, keep those minds open and curious.